Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of my interview series. Today, I've got Sophy and Joanna. They are Chinese living in China, but have spent a lot of time outside of China in the US, the UK, and Italy. And part of this inspired them to co-found a Chinese hair care brand called Terapia. It's already launched in China and has received over $5 million in seed funding, and it's establishing itself both online and offline in the China market. So I thought it would be interesting to have them both on today to discuss a bit about their journey and the hair care industry and market in China at the moment. So Sophia and Joanna, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit of why you guys decided to start a hair care brand? Like, what gap did you see in the market that you feel that Terapia is filling?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll get started for a little bit. So first of all, I think always the idea of starting something new comes from personal experience. Especially for this personal care, hair care stuff. A lot of people, we get these questions a lot. You were working in financial services, so why would you all of a sudden want to start a brand in hair care? So Joanna and myself were actually avid user of all kinds of hair care products before we started this brand. So for example, I had pretty frizzy hair throughout my whole life. And because I have worked and studied across different cities, New York, Hong Kong, London, and also Shanghai. And I've experienced all kinds of climates. And this have caused different issues for my frizzy hair, I would say. And for that reason, I've tried, I would say, thousands of hair care products across different brands. However, especially after I came back to China, working in Shanghai, I couldn't find the right hair care product that I would like to use on a daily basis. That got me pretty frustrated. So I also had a lot of conversations with people around me, especially younger generations, that they were constantly looking for right hair care solutions, especially in the face of a lot of the thinning hair issues that young people are experiencing these days due to strong stress and I would say irregular schedule due to overwork and stuff. So that I heard all these kind of voices, and that got me to explore this specific vertical in hair care. Maybe Joanna wants to add to some of that, her experience as well, because she had a pretty interesting story too.
I think personally, for me, it was just because I had this problem of thinning hair, and I was just trying to search for a product that you can use to volumize your hair. But then, I realized that usually the products like the shampoos that you can find in the market, they are designed for I don't know, Western scalp types. And also I think our hair are really different from hair of, I don't know, white people or black people, because I think Asian people has really fine hair and I don't know, pretty fragile. And that's why I was thinking that probably we should find something that is just for our, that's specifically designed for us. I tried different brands. I tried a lot of the Japanese brands because I was thinking probably they have similar problems, but it's still quite different, because I think in Japan they are very focused on providing the called clean or whatever, like clean formula. So like they don't really clean your scalp enough, which is a problem for me because I have really oily scalp, and if I don't clean it enough, it causes hair loss and like a lot of issues. So yeah, when I met Sophie in London, we're just talking, and it just hit us that we were both looking for like a perfect, like the perfect shampoo throughout our life. And it's funny because together we almost tried, I think, I wouldn't say like 100%, but like 99% of all the shampoos available on the market, like from Europe, from the States, from Asia. But we still feel that there's no product that can actually satisfy our needs. And that's why we're thinking probably we should do that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've done quite a lot of work with brands in the hair care space. And I think there is in China a very clear discontent with the options that are available. Like people are not happy with the options. There's a lot of switching between brands. And obviously you guys both mentioned two of the most common issues with hair concerns. So first of all, the thinning hair is really a concern with young people in China, which is something that in the West it's not such a big issue with younger people. So China, I think that's you know, all the stress, the 996 life, you know, all this stuff that
996, yeah, right.
Exactly.
And also frizzy hair is something that comes quite high up on when you look at the studies as well in terms of pain points. The other thing that's interesting at the moment is you mentioned scalp. So scalp is something that I've seen quite a lot of growth in the last sort of 12, 18 months in China in terms of demand for scalp care. There's just as a slight aside, wanted to ask you, because in China, there's a specific thing about scalp and like saggy scalp, saggy face, right? This idea of your scalp linking to your, like this anti-aging thing. So is that something that you guys ever use when you talk to consumers, or is it just something that culturally you have in the back of your mind that you know that it's something that people think about?
Yes, I actually think because the China market is at the very early stage of understanding the importance of scalp health. People were, I would say majority of the consumers are still trying to grasp the idea of they have to use conditioner after applying shampoo. And most consumers we encounter actually told us that they would rather just use one product for all of the routine of washing their hair. So I think to emphasize how you need to take care of your scalp and why scalp is so important is something truly important at this stage to educate the customers in China market. So definitely we'll try to, I would say, try to you know, deliver the message of the idea that scalp is somehow linked to your you know, skin, and you kind of need to adopt the attitude and the routine of taking care of your skin on a daily basis, of taking care of your scalp as well. I think especially for young people these days, even though they were experiencing high level of stress under the 996 schedule, they were trying to spend as much as you know, they would love to on their personal health and personal well-being, I would say. So that is definitely something we pay a lot of attention to, and we would incorporate that in our brand message as well.
Okay. So, I mean, then looking more generally at hair care, how the hair care market's changing in China, like, you know, we talked a little bit about scalp, but what are some trends that you guys are seeing at the moment?
So for me, I would say we're definitely seeing, you know, I would say maybe 2 to 3 trends, general trends. First one is definitely the premiumization of the brand. So we're seeing during, I would say, several years back, if you look at what kind of brands that people use, they were usually under Unilever and P&G. And they were super accessible. You can get anywhere in the supermarket. And people were mostly purchasing for just pure utility purpose. Yeah, they were not, I would say between the brands, they were not differentiating themselves enough. And people were pretty satisfied with that situation. But during this couple of years, we're definitely seeing, people were willing to pay much more for brands and products that can actually solve their issues. And I would say if you look at the increase in the price range, that is quite significant. If you compare, let's say, the Kerastase under Oreo versus, P&G brand or Unilever brand, the price difference is it's kind of huge. And second is I think we're seeing, like you mentioned, we're seeing early adopters of these premium brands. They were self-advocating for those I think specific needs that they want to see in hair care products.
Yeah, like
so
that
scalp.
That segmentation, right, in the market.
Yeah, segmentation, exactly. So scalp health is definitely one segment, but we're seeing other segments like for damage and dyed hair. You're also seeing, I think, pregnant people definitely wanted to have more clean solutions or less, kind of sensitive, friendly solutions. So I think these specific needs are definitely generated throughout these couple of years, pretty recent in China.
And in terms of the premiumization piece, obviously there are some brands that have really leveraged that. Kerastase from L'Oreal is one that very well. Do you think, and you guys are playing from a Chinese brand, playing in that space, right? But how do you see the differences between the local brands playing in that premium space versus the international brands, apart from budgets, like, okay, the big brands, budgets, but, aside from that, like how they're talking to the consumer or what they're focusing on, or do you have any thoughts on the differences there?
I think, Joanna can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that probably there's, I wouldn't say there's none, but I just don't think there are many players, like local players in the premium segment of the market. I mean, probably for I don't know, for the facial care, I don't know, you can still find some Chinese brands play in the premium segment, but for hair care, there's just none apart from us. I think so I think there are two reasons. First of all, it's because hair care is still like underdevelopment segmentation of personal care. So you see people spend like, I don't know, like 2,000 yuan for like La Pré hair cream, but they don't want to necessarily spend like 200 yuan for like a, I don't know, for a bottle of shampoo, which is interesting because it's as Sophie said, it's because it's still like a long way to go for the Chinese hair care market. Secondly, it's because the perception of the customer, and unfortunately, people still see, I don't know, like the Western brand as the more premium, more, I don't know, established. I think it's because of the work they have done in the past 20 years. So for example, I think Kerastase is like the most, I don't know, like the like people, when people talk about like the premium hair care brand, they would think of Kerastase, and a lot of hair salons, they would advertise on this, and they would be like, we're using Kerastase shampoo in our salon, which is interesting, which is really interesting because like I remember when I lived in Europe, especially Italy, because there are so many different hair care brands. A lot of them are organic, and people don't necessarily think Kerastase is a really great brand. The perception is just different, right? And they would probably use like the more, I don't know, the more independent or indie brand, like I don't know, Moroccan oil and a lot of European organic brands. Because I think people are just more likely to try for different brands to find their own, like find the one that is more suitable for themselves. Versus in China, it's more like, oh, this brand is on Li Jiaqi's live stream, so I have to get it.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
this one is.
That's the immaturity of the market as well, right? Like, so obviously in skincare and makeup, those big brands still do very well, but there is more diversification of the market. There are more niche brands that people are interested in and people are buying. I think hair care is just that it's a matter of time. We've already seen some international players that are, you know, market leaders like Olaplex. They're now in China doing pretty well. And so I think that we need more of the international. Interestingly, I think for you guys, you need more of the international players to come in to almost build the market. And then once people start thinking, oh, there's other products outside of Kerastase in this premium space, then they start going, oh, okay, well, what are the local, well, you know, what's the local option? Well, and especially to your point earlier, Sophie, about this, or both of you talking about Chinese hair, like the difference between, that's something that I think the Western brands, when they're coming in, they really need to address. Like how do they talk about how their products are good for Chinese hair? And of course, you guys are designed for Chinese hair, so it's a whole nother level. But I think that's something the market hasn't fully been created yet. Because when I look at the market rankings, I mean, Kerastase takes, you know, more than out of the top 20, they're like more than 10 of their products are in the top 20, right? So they're completely dominating shampoo over 200 RMB, like they completely dominate it. But I think because generally consumers want different options, right? They want to explore different options. So I think that's still a big opportunity.
Yeah.
The maturity. Yeah. And so for you,
I think I'll just add one. Oh, I think I'll just add one small point. I think because I used to use Kerastase a lot as well. I think the difference we're also trying to create is, even though it's difficult to build a D2C brand in China, given the different ecosystem. But what we're trying to do differently from Kerastase is still to have a closer connection with the end consumers. So to include them much earlier in the development, cycle for our new products. I think it will be difficult for a lot of, these huge brands like Kerastase to achieve that, because they definitely have a different internal procedure for launching new products. And because I also understand they rely quite heavily on the salon networks to distribute their products. So I think the connection with end consumer that we're building is something that we value very much as well in the process.
Absolutely. And in other categories, we've seen that be very successful for Chinese brands, right? Like creating those networks, creating the communities, really being able to leverage that that community to feel like they're inputting into what you're doing. And Hua Xizi, the florists, they do that. Lots of brands in the makeup space are doing that. And of course, makeup product development is so quick, and it's quite easy to get them to have input. I think hair care, it's complex to do that, but great that you can bring people on the journey, because that's a massive differentiator versus the foreign brands. Because even the big foreign brands, because of the way that they work, it's hard for them to do that. But even the smaller foreign brands, it's very hard for them to do that because they don't have a big enough market in China versus their global market. So they're not formulating for China.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great differentiator. So we talked a while ago about you guys thinking for La Terapia to expand outside of China as well. And obviously something on your roadmap is to move into different geographies. Where do you see the biggest challenge, like for you and also for, you know, Chinese brands in general, moving outside of China into other markets?
Yeah, I think I'll first say from my personal perspective. I think first of all would be I think we had a small discussion before about these is to enter the market for especially if we are talking about European and North American market. To localize your content and to tell a compelling brand story for the local audience is something that would be a little bit challenging for most Chinese brands. I do think this is something that we have a relatively stronger position in, because both of us and also the rest of the founding team had experience living overseas and can leveraging their personal experience from the either the Europe or North America. But for most other Chinese brands, that is definitely like the first challenge that they would encounter, because in China it's definitely not super content driven, as much content driven as in Western market. And I think second is to is definitely to combat to find your anchor, to combat those established players in the Western markets. I think, for example, because you listed the J Beauty, K Beauty, they were definitely great precedent examples to learn from, because usually they anchor on one really interesting and kind of a little bit of a how to say mysterious ingredient or something that I would say Western audience or consumers are not super familiar with, but they would be curious to learn more about. I think that so that's that kind of I would say legendary ingredient or kind of formula or something that's kind of would be attractive for Western culture to comprehend is definitely for Chinese brands or even Asian brands, that's something that's it will be successful. If they can bring that to the Western market, it will be a great successful start. Yeah.
I think your point about the content driven or the story, the brand story. So the brand story is something that I often find is a little bit weak in China. Very few brands really put forward their founder story. So you guys, when you're talking to a Chinese audience, do you put yourselves at the front? Do you talk about your background? Do you really do you do that?
Yeah, I think Joanna can talk about that. She's the main content creator.
Okay.
For our brand.
We do, but I totally understand your point of the difference between Chinese market and the Western market. I think in China it's uncommon. It's just rare for the founders to talk about their stories, because I think for a lot of reasons. I think because Chinese people usually, we're not that individualistic.
Yeah.
And it's just weird to talk about your own stories, like, and as a brand. And also it's sometimes it's dangerous because it's risk of associating a brand to a specific person. And sometimes, like in China, it's usually like what always happens is like people dig really deep into this person's background and they find something uh, which can jeopardize the whole brand. But yeah, I think I think more and more people are comfortable talking about their brand, their stories in front of the public in China now. And we also, I mean, I also have like account or stuff like that on social media in China, like Red. And sometimes customers would write to me, and it's just it's amazing that I think younger generation realize that they actually it's just great. They can actually talk to someone who are like, you know, creating those products for them, and they feel that, and they give them, it's kind of like empower them, because they're not just satisfied being on the receiving end, like some big international corporation just, you know, came here and be like, we have the best product, and you need to pay, right? They're more like they actually want to know more about how the brand is created and who are the people behind, and they're not that they don't really care that much about like whether it's like a big international corporation anymore.
Yeah, I think there are some really interesting points in there. If you sort of dissect what you're saying, this idea about culturally, how difficult and uncomfortable it feels to put yourself forward. I think that's something that, you know, I think maybe a lot of Western brands don't realize, because in the West, it's so normal now, right? Like all the niche brands, most of them, a lot of them have a founder story, and the consumers want to see that because they want that authenticity. They don't really want it to be just a company with no face, right? They want to know, and they're on the websites, the founders are telling their story about hair loss or about getting ill and changing their routine or whatever that is. And that's really something that differentiates a niche brand from a big brand, like from a L'Oreal group, from an Estee Lauder group, because you have those stories. But in China, yes, it's absolutely not there. And whether it will ever get there is a question, right? But I think that when Chinese brands are looking to go overseas, it's something that you guys have to balance, because a company without that background story doesn't feel so believable. And so people really, so that, you know, that's something you can play, right? You can play up that in the West and play it down in China. But I think also what you were saying, that there is maybe with younger consumers that they like that accessibility. And yes, of course, someone can dig and find something, and you know, that can be nerve-wracking. It's the same everywhere, right? Like that is a risk that you run. But I think that it's interesting, and I feel like we will see more brands in China bringing that forward, because like Perfect Diary, they created amazing communities with their you know, on WeChat, but it was all quite fake, right? Because it's not, it's like it worked for a period of time, but then it didn't work so well anymore. And I think because consumers were like, well, they enjoyed these groups where they could all talk and they share things, but actually the person from Perfect Diary that was there and they're moderated, they're not real. Like it's not a real person. It's a company. So I don't know. I think there's something there, and so I think it's very interesting that you guys are sort of exploring that, but understand for everyone listening that is it's a real challenge for Chinese brands and Chinese culturally to do that. So yeah, I think it's interesting. So I guess, like, to end really, do you have any advice for niche foreign brands looking to come into the market in the hair care space, or is there any focus that you would recommend, or anything that you think that could support? Because I do believe that you guys, your market needs more other brands to help the market grow. Like, I don't think it's a matter, I think it's a communal thing. So what advice can you give?
Yeah, so I think yeah, we definitely want to have more I think successful or established hair care brands, especially those niche ones that we used to use personally, you know, when we were studying abroad to come into the China market. I I do think that for Chinese consumer, it will be I think it will be helpful for these brands to be more just localize their pain points that they want to address for a Chinese audience. Because I think I do see some brands that are quite successful abroad. They didn't, I would say, adjust or moderate their message enough for Chinese audience. And will definitely generate some kind of a gap in terms of understanding what their product's trying to solve in terms of a specific hair problem or scalp problem. Yeah, and yeah, that I think that is one observation. Yeah, and I would say also I think like I mentioned that for those specific, I think shampoo is something that a lot of the customers are already super familiar with. But if a lot of brands can collaboratively introduce more kind of innovative scalp and hair products into the Chinese market, and just put more resource on putting up educational content, I think that will be helpful too, because traditionally speaking, the thinning hair is always associated with stigma or embarrassment on the consumer end. So if those brands can, you know, try to find, you know, interesting or interactive ways to educate the audience while solving this type of embarrassment and stigma associated with the thinning hair issues, I think that would be interesting, and that will be very promising trend too for the market. Yeah.
Also, I think it's very important for the foreign brands to find the right partner in China, because a lot of brands, they start really well because like probably they're already like famous in overseas, and there are probably a lot of people who really looking forward to buy them. But sometimes it happens like they didn't really find the partner who understands both the Western culture and the Chinese culture. So either they kind of like couldn't catch up because probably the partner doesn't really know well the Chinese market, or they find someone who's really good at doing things in the Chinese market, but they're not really great at communicating with the brand itself. So sometimes it happens that like we see what happens is like they change partners and they kind of lose brand equity during the process, because people will be like, oh my god, like why their team also is closing, right? And it's actually because like they're changing partners. So like I think it's important to find the right one from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that balance is really important. Like, you want to be able to give your local Chinese partner enough room to really leverage what they know and experience the market, but there does need to be a good communication between the brand and the partner, and having that bridge is really important. And I think the point about, you know, foreign brands, Chinafying, as we've called it. I did another podcast with someone talking about Chinification. Foreign brands really, like, how do they Chinafy their brands? And I think brands are starting to realize that they have to do that for China. China is an extremely important market with a big enough opportunity, and it's so unique that you do have to manage your messaging and really localize. I think it's a struggle for niche brands purely from a bandwidth and a budget perspective, because they have, you know, their teams don't often have the capability to do it, or if they do, like, they don't have the money to do it locally in China. So that is a bit of a pain point for brands, but it's crucial. It's really important. So they have to figure it out. So great advice. Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing La Terapia grow more in China and hopefully expand into other markets as well. It's an exciting space, premium hair care. I think there's, as we've talked about, so much opportunity in the market, like so much. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing your thoughts with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, great to be here.